In this tutorial, we will cover the various interval modes available with CameraRC Deluxe and show how to set up interval shooting. This tutorial also covers shooting intervals with brackets. When shooting intervals, make sure that you have either manually focused the camera or that you have adequate lighting and subject contrast for the camera to autofocus on the subject. If the camera is in an autofocus mode that requires focus before the capture and focus is not achieved, then interval shots will be missed. Before starting your interval shooting, make sure that the shot count for the camera is set to 1. Otherwise, multiple shots might be made at each interval. On the Intervals and Brackets tab, we find some basic interval controls that show the current interval mode, shots taken so far in the current interval, time to the next shot, and the Start button for the interval. Click on the current interval mode setting to open the Intervals panel. There are 4 interval modes available with CameraRC Deluxe: Start-Stop time, time length, number of shots, and weekly schedules. In Start-Stop interval mode, the start and stop time are specified along with the time between shots. When using a time interval, then it is just necessary to set the length of time for the interval and the time between shots. If using number of shots interval mode, set the shot count to the number of shots for the interval and the interval length. Weekly schedules specify a schedule that can have many different intervals within the schedule. More on schedules later in this tutorial. To start, I'll set the interval mode to number of shots. Here the shot count is set to 4. I've also set the shot interval to 10 seconds. If you are saving images to the computer, ensure that the shot interval allows enough time for the images to be downloaded. Now I will click on the Start interval. I can use the Start button located on the Intervals panel or on the Intervals and Brackets tab. Note the Start button becomes the Stop button when the interval is started. As the shots are taken, we can watch the countdown for the shots and the time to the next shot. We can close the interval panel and monitor the interval from the camera control panel. As shots are taken, we can see the images appear in the thumbnails window. Using the Stop button, we can end the interval at any time. I'll now reopen the Intervals panel and take a look at weekly schedules. Click on the Create Schedules to open the Weekly Schedules configuration dialog. To configure a schedule item, first select the day of the week. Notice that multiple days can be selected. Next, specify a start and stop time for the schedule item. Note that the end time must be after the start time. The interval item should be set to active if it will be in use. Notice that individual schedule items can be deactivated without deleting from the schedule. Finally, set the length for the shot interval. Now the interval item can be added and will appear in the list of schedule items. I'll now create a schedule item for a different day and time. Here I configure an interval item for Monday and set it to start at a different time. I will leave the interval length the same. I'll then add a new item to the schedule. If you want to change a schedule, select the schedule item, make any changes, and then click the Update button. Now that we have the schedule ready, I'll close the dialog and start the calendar interval. You will see that if the schedule interval has not yet started, that the time to next shot will show as waiting. Once the interval starts, the time to next shot will show the time actually remaining. We'll stop the interval, and now I'm going to show how to use intervals with brackets. To shoot our intervals with brackets, the bracketing mode must be set to standard and the single shot bracketing enabled. To use single shot bracketing, ensure the camera is set to a continuous shooting mode. I'll be using AE bracketing with a shot count of 3 for the bracket. See our bracketing tutorial for more information on configuring brackets. Going back to the Interval tab, I'll switch back to a number of shots interval, and then I'll make sure that there is adequate time between shots to shoot and download all the images in the bracket. We now start the interval with brackets. Notice that when the 3 bracket shots are taken at the interval, we can see that each was at a different exposure as was set in the bracket. Thank you for watching our tutorial on interval shooting with CameraRC Deluxe.